Overnight, I grew a little Confucius beard and began to babble about the meaning of life. What has happened to my clever little sword with which I used to learn how to fence? Can it be that only yesterday I gave it away? Oh, let him keep it, he upon whom I bestowed it. It is years already since I have longed for my childhood. I think that it would be both audacious and rude to be young in such haggish times. I'm precisely as old as one should be at this very moment. On the one hand, just enough days consumed. On the other, still a few of what I'm worth for a restless stroll on this searing earth. Do I believe in the future, in humanity? I imagine, yes, but I've been believing that for a good many years. And I'm tired, as I am a Jew, of wading through blood. I no longer have the hardihood to immerse myself in faith. New believers are maturing, and new thieves, and even in the living remnant, seated and scattered, new Jews are emerging. For a fresh cycle, beginning, middle, almost end. Here it is, almost end. Punishment without reward, darkness and salvation accounted. How many have remained? Further driven, further fled. I am tired of the constant hunt and hurry, or because I am a Jew. See with what dexterity I knew when to be born. I could have sworn I'm now exactly as old as a young man of my years ought to be. Exactly as old as that distant spot of my childhood's ravaged home, from which upon a time, without longing, but with childish temerity I rode away. How foolishly! I've caught a reminiscent glance thereon in my later years, and ought usefully to give one saddened look at least upon a piece of burnt-out future life. Thank you.
The Chinese waiter addressed him in Yiddish. On the way out, as he was paying the check, he said to the proprietor, "You run a wonderful restaurant, and a Chinese waiter who speaks Yiddish? What a wonderful gimmick that is." "Not so loud, not so loud," says the proprietor. "He thinks we're teaching him English." Thank you.
Thank you. A question of sharing. Pinkus the tailor and his wife Leah lived in a small town in Lithuania. He earned a good living by working hard, and he was known for the good work he did. He never wasted cloth, and when a piece of material was left over, he would say to his customer, "This is not my cloth to keep. If I need something, God will help me." Then the tailor would add, "And wear it in good health," as he handed back the extra cloth. Honest and pious, this tailor lived happily with his wife, and the couple was blessed with twin sons, the older by a few minutes, Yankel, and the younger, Yussel. As the children grew, they saw that no matter how noisy or hurried everything was during the week, on Shabbos there was a change in the house. The tailor would go out early Friday morning to the marketplace, even before the morning service, and he would bring home, in honor of Shabbos, the best fish and the fattest chicken, candles and wine, and always 2 sprigs of flowers. "Why 2 bunches of flowers, Papa?" the young man would ask. The young sons would ask each other each week, and Pinkus would always answer, "1 to remember the Shabbos and 1 to observe the Shabbos. 2 for us to share in the delight of Shabbos." And Leah would be busy cleaning and cooking and baking 2 challahs for Shabbos. "Mama, why do you bake 2 loaves of challah?" the boys would ask. "To remember the double portion of manna God gave to the Israelites in the desert." "My sons, we share 2 loaves," she answered as she continued her work to make everything ready for Shabbos. Just as the sun was at the level of the treetops, Leah would light the Shabbos candles, always 4 candles, and recite the blessing. "Why 4 candles, Mama?" the boys would ask. "1 for each of us in the family, my children, and this way we can all share in the light of the Shabbos." But the wheel of fortune turns, and the tailor and his wife became poor. They tried to save enough money to buy special foods for Shabbos, but it was very difficult. There came a time when Pincus could no longer buy two of everything. He would buy only one sprig of flowers and split it in two. His wife would have enough dough for only one challah, but she divided it into smaller loaves. And the boys stood silently and watched. There was barely enough money for candles and wine, so the tailor bought only 2 candles and wine enough for Kiddush. And if there was no wine, then he would recite the Kiddush over the challah. When the twins were old enough to understand, Pincus said to him, "My sons, you are brothers. Give to each other, and gold God will give to you. If you have an apple, cut it in 2, so each of you can enjoy at least a little piece. Don't be selfish, and don't fight over anything. What can I do? We have to make the best of what we have." The boys had 1 pair of shoes between them and 1 suit of clothes, and since they had to share, they took turns going to shul. The uncle would go 1 week wearing the suit and shoes, and Yussel would go the next week. And they had 1 book to learn from, 1 hat, 1 coat, 1 of everything. Everything the twins had was shared. The uncle had nothing just for himself, and Yussel had nothing just for himself. One Friday evening, years later, Pincus sat at the table with his family. He looked at his now grown-up sons and said to the oldest one, "Yankel, you know that each of the days of the week has a partner. Sunday has Monday, Tuesday has Wednesday, and Thursday has Friday." So Shabbos became jealous and said to God, "Why did you give a partner to all the days, but not to me? I am alone." God saw that Shabbos was right and said, "Shabbos, you too will have a partner. The Jewish people will be your partner." "Well, my oldest son, it is now time for you too to have a partner. And so I have arranged a shidduch for you with a fine young woman. What do you say to that, Yankel?" Yankel looked bewildered for a moment, and he looked at his brother Yussel. He looked at 1 pair of shoes, the 1 suit of clothes, and once again at Yussel. Then he turned to his father and asked sharply, simply, "Papa, do I have to share her too?" Pincus and Leah looked at each other and burst out laughing. Then together they raised their cups of wine and said, "L'chaim," as they continued to share the joys of Shabbos. Thank you.
Some Talmudic students came to their rabbi and made a shamefaced confession. "Rabbi, we've committed a sin." "A sin? What kind of sin?" "We looked with lust upon a woman." "May God forgive you," cried the holy man. "That indeed is a serious transgression." "Rabbi," said the students humbly, "what can we do to atone?" "Well, if you sincerely seek penance, I order you to put peas in your shoes and walk about that way for 10 days. Perhaps that will teach you not to sin again." The 2 young men went home and did as the rabbi had ordered them. A few days later, the penance met on the street. One was hobbling painfully, but the other one walked easily, his manner calm and contented. "Is this the way to obey the rabbi?" asked the first student reproachfully. "I see you ignored his injunction to put peas in your shoes." "I didn't ignore him at all," said the other cheerfully. "I just cooked them first." Thank you.
3 men sentenced to death. 3 Soviet citizens, a Pole, a Czech, and a Jew, were accused of spying and sentenced to death. Each was granted a last wish. "I want my ashes scattered over the grave of Pilsudski," said the Pole. "I want my ashes scattered over the grave of Masurk," said the Czech. "And I," said the Jew, "want my ashes scattered over the grave of Comrade Kosygin." "But that's impossible," he was told. "Kosygin isn't dead yet." "Fine," said the Jew, "I can wait." Thank you.
Bashert, Janelle and Asher Moses. I arrived at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv on the 5th night of Hanukkah. For 3 months, I had imagined this arrival. I was nervous. I wheeled my oversized duffel bag behind me, passed through customs, and followed exit signs through the concourse. During 36 hours of transit, I had traveled from summer in Santiago, Chile, to a snowy 8-hour layover in Frankfurt, Germany, where I caught a flight to Tel Aviv. Asher, was he there? Will I recognize him? It wasn't fatigue that made recognizing him difficult. I had never actually seen him before. It seemed like a blur of Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi Jewish faces. Where was Asher? I had memorized his photo. He was brown-skinned with deep, dark eyes, a handsome man in his early 30s. What if Asher wasn't the man he claimed to be? I was to spend 3 weeks alone in the apartment of someone with whom I had never shared a meal. My mouth felt dry. I could barely swallow. Smiling tentatively, I again scanned the arrival crowd. What if he didn't show up? Our first date had been in cyberspace on Yahoo Chat, just before Rosh Hashanah. We were 8,219 miles away from each other. Asher logged on at home in Herzliya, Israel, while I sat in the dank staff lounge at the Chaim Weizmann Institute of Hebrew in Santiago, Chile, where I taught. Asher found me on a popular Jewish dating website. The idea of online dating was ridiculous to me. It was desperate, impersonal. But Jennifer, my dear Jewish friend in Chile, asked me to take a look at a candidate for her on the website. I soon swallowed my pride and wrote a profile of my own. Asher Moses was the first person to write to me. He lived in Herzliya. His self-description seemed gentle and kind, but his photo portrayed a man of strength and power. This profile must be a hoax. I thought, what good-looking man cares more about inner beauty? I mused cynically. An observant Jew who spoke Hindi and Marathi, French and English, and lived in Israel? A convert? A foreign worker? My ignorance was glaring. I wrote back. Over the course of our 3-month, long-distance, most virtual relationship, we exchanged photos and engaged in a nightly 8-hour phone conversations. We discussed politics and religion, our families and careers. We disagreed, but just as often agreed on core values, and we both wanted children. During another early morning for me, late night for him conversation, Asher asked, by the way, do you make challah? I have made challah a couple of times, I responded, wondering if that would be a deal breaker. Well, dental care is highly subsidized here in Israel, so if I break a tooth, we are covered. And of course, we can always use a loaf as a doorstop. Immigrating to Israel from India late in his childhood, Asher struggled to learn Hebrew, yet he had completed a BA in political science and been accepted to a law program at the Interdisciplinary Center of Herzliya, the Harvard of Israel. Everything about Asher fascinated me. He was steady and predictable. He never failed to pick up the phone when I called, never flaked on a virtual date. I didn't yet have his phone number and could reach him only via his Yahoo username and email address. I knew his cyber locations by heart, and when he was not online, I panicked, realizing I could lose him in real space. I didn't even have a street name. A strange incident of telepathy had occurred one evening when my doorman, Don Carlos, slipped the mail under my door. The mail included an envelope with Asher's photo. I looked at the image of Asher taken from the waist up and thought, What a beautiful man. However, I don't know if his legs work or if he has legs at all. I dismissed the thought as strange and superficial and chided myself for my own negativity. Moments later on the phone, without prompting from me, Asher volunteered the information that he had contracted polio as a baby. The doctors had predicted he would never walk, but unwavering determination had solidified the healing process. Asher now walked for miles without assistance. Though one of my knees doesn't lock and I have a slight limp, polio doesn't impact my life in any significant way, he told me. I just wanted you to know everything about me. I quickly assured him that it made no difference to me at all. I knew it wouldn't change anything, he said. We are soulmates. Now finally, in the airport, ready to acquaint myself with the man I already loved and admired, I felt cowardly. A familiar voice penetrated the international airport chatter. "Hi, baby, it's me," Asher said. I knew that voice well. It was a kind voice, masculine and deep. I turned and saw blue corduroy cargo pants and Italian black leather boots. He was smiling at me from several feet away. His voice was profoundly familiar, and yet, to my eyes, Asher was a total stranger. I wanted to quickly weave through the people separating us and rush into his arms, but I couldn't. I was jarred by the sudden, apparent dissonance of deeply loving a total stranger. I slowly made my way to him, offered a meek, self-conscious smile, and put my hand on his cheek. He didn't hug or kiss me, rather immediately understood and accepted my unspoken need for transition. He helped me with my bag. Several days after my official immigration to Israel, Asher's computer broke down. "Use my backpack," I told Asher, who needed to carry the bulky metal hard drive across the street to the Argentinian computer technician. He came back several minutes later, breathless with excitement. "Something truly unbelievable happened," he said. "When I took the computer out of your bag, a Chilean coin fell out. The computer technician isn't Argentinian, he's Chilean." I walked into the cramped storefront, greeted the owner, Avi in Spanish, and he responded in kind. When I mentioned the school where I had taught, his face lit up. His cousin worked there. He told me her name. I knew her, and I knew several other people that he listed. Then he asked me about rabbis and synagogues. I listed the rabbis and the families whom I had often shared Shabbat meals. "Rabbi Sheikh," he said, "I'm invited to his daughter's wedding this coming week." Asher and I looked at each other. "We are too," he responded. We were astonished by the coincidence. Our meeting had bridged two countries on two different continents in two different hemispheres, a random union of total strangers separated by more than 8,000 miles. Yet only 1 degree of separation had existed between us all along, Bashert. My grandma Molly would say. Asher and I married on July 22nd, 2005, in Herzliya, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. We stood beneath a shimmering tree of life chuppah sewn by an award-winning fabric artist, my Aunt Betsy. The leaves of the trees were cut from gold material contributed by friends and families. After ceremony, our guests spontaneously began to dance in concentric circles. Rings of family members, American Indian, Ashkenazi, and Mizrahi, whirled around the parquet floor. In 2007, our daughter was born, Maya Yerusha, and our lives continue together today. Asher and I work on our relationship daily. We do fall in love with each other once again on a regular basis.
Rothenberg So happens the slaughterer would sometimes have to saw off a piece of wood. One day, Brother saw across the way and let his tongue cut loose. "Hey there," he said, "look at that dumb goose flashing his pearly whites. Lord, what a show. You want to know something? That sure is a set full of, you bet, scratches and patches, a whole banged up row. That saw looks unkosher from head to toe. And see what he's wearing, them poor woolen threads. When I take a look at some deadheads, I thank my old Father in the sky for making things sweet and ugly too. I'm doing great, just a lucky old Jew. Not a spot of rot on my kosher steel, not a blot on my ideal. No wonder Reb Elkanah's saintly hand can close around me with holiness and repose, while he prays, watching heaven along the line of his nose. True, says Brother Simple Saw, can he be that naive? I do really believe Reb Elkanah shouldn't say a blessing over me. No, some stuff would not go down. People would laugh both of us out of town. I'm just an honest worker, plain to see. I don't sparkle, not one spark. I just stand in a corner where it's dark. Keep in my place and don't try to appear too good. Lord knows I'm only fit for cutting wood, but you, no joking matter, you cut throats. Let's give a twist to the tale and add some moral notes. Brother Saw is still an honest worker, plain to see, a black spot on his family tree, while Brother Knife is playing a sharper game. He kills, and blessings are said over him just the same. Thank you.
Since he had his own room and a place for his books and for studying. When it came time for meals, the whole family gathered at the big round dining table to eat together. The son and his wife treated him well. Soon there was a grandchild, and the old man took great pleasure in watching his grandson grow. He loved to take the child on his lap and tell him stories. As the years went by, the old man's hands began to shake, at first only a little, and then all the time. Sometimes he would spill his soup because of his trembling hands, or he would drop a plate, and little by little, his son became more and more and more impatient with him. One day, as the whole family was sitting at the dining table, the old man accidentally hit the plate with the soup spoon. The plate broke, spilling the soup on the tablecloth and onto his lap. His son threw down his spoon and jumped up angrily, shouting, "If you can't eat like a mensch, eat alone. I'm tired of you spilling food on our good tablecloths and breaking our good dishes." The next day, the son brought home a wooden plate. He then set a table in the old man's room, using an old bedsheet as a tablecloth, and served him his food on the wooden plate. The old man said nothing and ate his meals alone day after day. But to be separated from his family in this way hurt him very much. One day, when the son came home from work, he noticed his young son working at a task in the corner. "Well, my big son, what keeps you so busy?" he asked. "I'm making a plate, carving it from wood all by myself," answered the little boy. His father was surprised. "A plate of wood? What would you do with that? We have such beautiful dishes." And the little boy answered, "I know, Father, but I'm making this plate for you when you grow old like Grandfather. And when your hands begin to shake, why then I'll have this wooden plate ready to give you in your little room. When the father heard this, he ran to his father and fell to his knees. Forgive me, my father. Forgive me. Forgive me for not showing you the respect and honor due to you. And he wept. Yes, the father forgave the son, and that evening the family sat together at the big round table. As for the old man, he sat at the place of honor. Thank you.
This is an ode to Mrs. Stahl. Lined up in rows folded in thin papery wrap, potato, kasha, and cherry cheese, Mrs. Stahl's knishes, older ladies with hair tied up in netted buns, handed over the knish, too hot anyway, unwrapping the crackling clear paper, spotted with drops of oil, burning your mouth if you could not wait to sink your teeth into the smooth potato, or grace the roof of your mouth with the grainy kasha. In the summer, we walked eating them out under the L, down Coney Island Avenue, 1 block to the boardwalk and the beach. In the winter, we ate them in the store, sitting on metal seats crowded around a small formica table with best friends. The store became our sanctuary, Mrs. Stahl's, a Brighton Beach landmark no more, but decades later easily recalling the taste, the texture, the warmth with ones who remember. Thank you.
At Jones Beach. It was a hot day at Jones Beach. Bessie Cone was there with her 3-year-old grandson. She had bought him a cute little sailor suit with a hat, and she watched with delight as he played with his toys at the edge of the water. Suddenly a giant wave swept onto the shore, and before Bessie could even move, the boy was swept out into the cold Atlantic. Bessie was frantic. I know I've never been religious, she screamed to the heavens, but I implore you to save the boy. I'll never ask anything of you again. The boy disappeared from view, and Bessie was beside herself. He went under a second time, and Bessie began to wait. As he went under for the third time, she screamed mightily, appealing to God to save the boy's life. Her final supplication was answered as the sea suddenly threw the child onto the shore. He was badly shaken, but clearly alive. Bessie picked him up and put him down gently on a blanket far from the water. After looking him over, she turned her face toward the heavens and complained loudly, "He had a hat!"
The Kochelein. I had to practice that ch all week long. The first 8 summers of my life I spent strictly under the open fire hydrant on my block. I was 9 years old when my father, the tailor, decided his family would summer by the country. What a thrill for a kid from Brooklyn who has never penetrated deeper into the bush than Ocean Parkway. In the Daily Forward, Papa had read of a small boarding house that advertised rooms and bungalows and apartments to rent for the summer. Do your own cooking, rates very reasonable, beautiful view, private lake nearby, Hella's bungalow colony, Monticello, New York. This sounded great. Papa immediately dispatched a special delivery postcard for further details. A few days later, although it was only the first week in April, Mr. Heller called personally to set the deal. The way he described his Kochelein, it sounded like Monte Carlo instead of Monticello. Mr. Heller even offered to cart us up to see this paradise anytime in April or May before the season starts, so you can choose the best place. How could Pop refuse? Here was a chance for a free ride to the mountains on Sunday, and you could even take the kids along. There's no obligation on your part. Of course, if you didn't hire the rooms, there was a small charge for the ride, but this you didn't find out until later. Even if you did take the rooms, Hella still tried to chisel gas and food expenses for the long trip. Hella was a local merchant in Monticello who ran the shoe store. For the price of 2 pairs of sneakers, he had bought a hunk of property with a farmhouse. He added some rough cabins, hung out his roadside shingle, and he was in business. The colony consisted of 12 rooms in the main house and 3 bungalows with 1 big community kitchen. Mama's cousin, who was going to share the bungalow and expenses, came along for the ride. She loved the place. A Monte Carlo it wasn't, but it was the country, and Hella promised to take her into town twice a week to buy her kosher meals. He also pointed out the convenience of Rella's grocery store just across the road. He didn't, however, find it convenient to point out that the Rella was Hella spelled backwards. But I wanted to know, where's the Lakeview province? You said the bungalow colony was near a lake. It's about 3 miles away. I said it was near the lake, not on the lake. One season, circumstances dictated that Mama and I and my elder sister, Yetta, drive up by Hacker a week earlier than the rest of our chic ensemble. Mama had reserved the 3 back seats for us. The rest of the car contained an elderly lady and a young man who were squeezed together with a hacker in the front seat. A tubby bleached blonde sat on a jump seat with more of her hanging over both sides. The other passenger was a completely different smell together. He was a bald-headed man who was reverently carrying a jar with such care that it could have been the crown jewels, except that the wrappings around a jar of crown jewels are rarely fastened with a rubber band. As the sun came up full, we came to know its contents: garlic pickles. 7 minutes past the toll, the bleached blonde started. My Sam and I don't like formal hotel life. Every year we just prefer to hire a simple bungalow at Madame Goretsky's villa. Who wants to get dressed 3 times a day? I get enough of that all winter, she said, balancing the pots and pans on her lap. You're so right, agreed the pickle man, who was going to Hella's bungalow colony. I'm so busy year-round that all I want to do is sit in front of my bungalow and dangle my feet in the lake. It occurred to me that if he was going to Hella's, his feet had better be 3 miles long. I far prefer the more relaxed tempo that one finds at the bungalow colony. And this way, like my Sam and I always say, you can eat what you like. You don't have to be a slave to food 3 times a day. And the bleached job who looked like Fatso Farouk after a heavy meal. I was but a youngster on the green side of my bar mitzvah, but even I knew this was a crock. Nobody actually preferred a kachalade unless he could afford anything better. We all knew it, she knew it. And wherever Sam was, it figures he knew it too. When the hack arrived at our destination, it was near midnight. We had been the first ones to be picked up and were the last to be dropped off. Since our luggage and bedding were on the bottom, the hack man naturally waited until all the others were removed. The joy of the whole world for a kachalade wife is her first morning in the community kitchens. As our GIs fought for every inch of land on Guadalcanal, so did each woman fight to establish a beachhead at one of the 2 sinks. Armed with Brillo and scurrying powder, each lived by the motto, take the sink and hold it. Even the 2 ovens and the bread box became battlegrounds. Everybody fought for the best spot in the icebox too. The status symbol was the 2 cubic inches assigned to you, and the top shelf on the front was equivalent to a AAA rating in Dun & Bradstreet. Every jar of goodies had a label. The little lump of farmer cheese, already turning yellow, was tagged, quote, H. Potkin. The pickled blocks in the wax paper said J. Traum. One always heard such anguished cries as somebody's been at my stewed prunes. Who spilled and left the shelf so dirty? All right, so it was a little yellow, but did I give you permission to throw out my farmer cheese?
El Al jokes. El Al Airlines had just established transatlantic service and was making its inaugural flight from Tel Aviv to New York. Once aloft, the pretty stewardess picked up the microphone and talked to the passengers. This is the first transatlantic ocean nonstop flight from Israel to America. Just relax and enjoy the trip. You will know immediately if anything goes wrong. Our pilot will become hysterical. The El Al plane from Israel to America was over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when suddenly an engine failed. The pilot at once informed the passengers that unless a few of them bailed out, all the rest of the passengers would die. The plane load simply had to be lightened. A Frenchman arose and yelled, "Vive la France!" and leaped out the open door. Then an Englishman arose and yelled, "Long live the Queen!" and jumped out. Finally, a Jew arose from his seat and yelled, "Deutschland über alles!" and pushed a German out the door. Also aboard the El Al plane from Israel to America was a grandma making her first flight. They had only been aloft for a few minutes when the old lady complained to the stewardess that her ears were popping. The girl smiled and gave the older woman some chewing gum, assuring her that many people experience the same discomfort. When they landed in New York, Grandma thanked the stewardess. "The chewing gum worked fine," she said, "but tell me, how do I get it out of my ears?" Thank you.